There is a moment that almost every trader experiences. It doesn't happen at the beginning when everything is new and exciting and you're watching your first trade tick into profit. It doesn't happen during the good months when the charts are behaving, your setups are working, and you feel like you've finally figured something out. It happens after. After a bad week becomes a bad month. After a position you were so sure about moves completely against you. After you stare at a number on your screen and realize that number used to be much, much bigger and you're not entirely sure how you got here. That moment is the real beginning of your education as a trader. Because everything before that moment, all the studying, all the chart reading, all the paper trading and backtesting and YouTube videos, that was just preparation for the actual lesson. And the actual lesson is the one most traders spend years and sometimes all of their capital trying to avoid learning. Today we're going to talk about what that lesson is. Not as a warning, not to scare you, but because understanding it early before the market teaches it to you the expensive way might be the single most valuable thing you can take from any conversation about trading. Let's begin. Imagine you're hiking a mountain trail you've never walked before. You've studied the map, you know roughly where the summit is, you've got good boots, a decent pack, and enough water for the day. You're prepared, you feel ready. Halfway up the trail forks. One path is wider, well-worn, clearly marked. The other is narrower, steeper, but someone told you once that it's a shortcut to the top. You stand there for a moment, weighing it up. Most beginners take the shortcut. Not because they're reckless, not because they're stupid, but because they're optimistic. Because they believe the map in their head is more accurate than the terrain beneath their feet, because they want to reach the summit faster and the shortcut feels like the smarter move. The shortcut in most cases leads to cliffs. Trading is that mountain, and the shortcut that most traders spend years discovering is this: the belief that more aggression, more risk, more conviction on any single trade is how you build real wealth in the markets. It isn't. And the reason it isn't has nothing to do with courage or intelligence or how good your analysis is. It has everything to do with how the math of trading actually works, and math, unlike the market, has no interest in your confidence. Here is something worth sitting with for a moment. If you lose 50% of your account, you need a 100% gain just to get back to where you started. Let that breathe. A 100% gain, not to grow, not to make progress, just to get back to even, back to the starting line. Lose 25% and you need a 33% gain to recover. Lose 10% and you need an 11% gain. The further down you go, the steeper the climb back up becomes. The math works against you in a way that accelerates as your losses deepen. This is not opinion, this is arithmetic. And it means that in trading, how much you lose matters more than how much you make. Protecting what you have is not the cautious approach. It is the only approach that gives compounding a chance to work in your favor. The traders who understand this early build accounts quietly, steadily, in ways that don't make for exciting screenshots or viral posts. The traders who don't understand it are constantly rebuilding, constantly starting over, constantly wondering why the strategy that worked on paper is destroying them in practice. The difference isn't the strategy. The difference is almost always this. There was a trader named Daniel. He came to markets the way most people do. He'd watched a few videos, read a few books, opened an account with money he could technically afford to lose but didn't really want to. He was sharp, methodical, the kind of person who color-coded his journals and tracked every trade in a spreadsheet. His analysis was genuinely good, his setups made sense. He understood support and resistance, had a basic grasp of risk-to-reward, knew when his thesis was invalidated. On paper, he was a decent trader. In practice, something kept going wrong. Not with his ideas. His ideas were fine. What was going wrong was much quieter and much more destructive. When he really believed in a trade, when everything lined up and he was sure, he would size up, double his normal position, sometimes triple it. Because when you know, why would you treat it like you don't know? This is the logic that sounds reasonable until the market teaches you that certainty is not a thing the market respects. His good trades made him money, but his big trades, the ones he was most sure about, those were the ones that hurt him. Because the times he sized up were also often the times he was most emotionally invested in being right, which made it harder to cut the position when it moved against him, which turned small losses into large ones. 2 years in, Daniel had gone through most of his account, not in one catastrophic event. Slowly, in stages, a big loss here, a recovery, another big loss, a partial recovery, until finally he was sitting on less than a third of what he'd started with. He hadn't traded badly, he'd traded inconsistently. And inconsistency in trading, especially when it's driven by confidence rather than logic, is just a slower version of ruin. What Daniel eventually learned, and what took him far longer and far more money than it should have, is that conviction is not a position sizing tool. How sure you feel about a trade is one of the worst possible reasons to make it bigger. Let's talk about why. The market is a mechanism for humbling certainty. This isn't a philosophical position. It's a practical observation that every experienced trader eventually makes. The trades you are most convinced about are often the ones that move against you most aggressively, because the scenarios where something seems obvious to you are often the same scenarios where it seems obvious to everyone else, and crowded positions have a way of unwinding violently. Beyond that, your sense of certainty is not calibrated to the market's actual uncertainty. You feel certain based on the information available to you, the chart, the pattern, the news, the context. But markets contain the collective actions of millions of participants, institutional flows, algorithmic responses, macro events you're not tracking, and things that simply cannot be predicted. Your certainty is a feeling, the market's behavior is a fact. Sizing up based on certainty is sizing up based on a feeling. And feelings, however strongly held, do not move the market. The practical solution isn't to stop having conviction. Conviction can be a useful signal. It's to stop letting conviction determine how much you risk. Keep your position sizing consistent, disciplined, and independent of how you feel about any given trade. When you do that, your best ideas still make you money. They just don't take on the extra danger of being oversized when you're also the most emotionally attached to being right. There is a concept in trading psychology that doesn't get enough attention. It's called the illusion of control. When you increase your position size on a trade, something happens in your brain. You feel more involved, more committed, more in the game, and paradoxically, that sense of commitment can make you feel like you have more influence over the outcome. You don't. The market doesn't know you have a bigger position. The market doesn't care. The trade will go where the trade goes. But now you're in the position of watching it from a more emotionally vulnerable place, more likely to move your stop, more likely to exit too early when it's working, more likely to hold too long when it isn't. Bigger positions don't just increase your financial risk. They increase your cognitive risk. They cloud your judgment in exactly the moments when clear judgment matters most. Smaller, consistent positions do the opposite. They create enough emotional distance that you can observe the trade rationally. You can follow your plan. You can let the market do what it's going to do without feeling like your entire financial well-being is attached to this one candle. This is not a small advantage. Over hundreds and thousands of trades, this clarity compounds into dramatically better decision-making. And better decisions consistently applied is all trading actually is. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't force its way through stone. It finds the path of least resistance, moves around obstacles, flows into the lowest available spaces. Over time, given enough of it and enough time, it carves canyons. The Colorado River didn't cut the Grand Canyon by being aggressive. It did it by being consistent. Most traders approach markets like hammers. They want to hit things hard, force outcomes, break through by sheer force of will. When a trade doesn't work, they hit harder. When they're losing, they bet bigger. When they're frustrated, they trade more. The market treats hammers the way stone treats hammers, not with hostility, just with indifference. The traders who survive long enough to build real wealth tend to have a quality that looks boring from the outside. They are consistent. They are patient. They don't force. They show up, execute their process, accept what the market gives them, and move on. They're not trying to carve the canyon in a week. They're just flowing. Let's talk about what consistent, small risk per trade actually looks like in practice, not theoretically, actually. Say you're trading an account with $10,000. You decide to risk 1% per trade. That's $100 per trade in risk, not your position size, not how much you deploy, how much you're willing to lose if the trade goes wrong and hits your stop. You take a trade, your analysis is correct and it works. Your risk to reward was 1 to 2, meaning you made $200 on $100 at risk. Your account is now at $10,200. You take another trade, it doesn't work, you exit at your stop, you lose $100. Account 10,100. You take 5 more trades over the course of a week. 2 work, 3 don't. Net result, you made a little, nothing exciting, but your account is slightly larger than it was, and more importantly, you're not stressed. You slept fine, you didn't make any emotional decisions, you followed your plan. Now compare this to the trader risking 10% per trade. Same setup, same analysis, same week. But when the 3 losses come, they aren't $300, they're $3,000. And that $3,000 loss changes how the next trade gets taken. It changes the emotional state in the room. It changes whether decisions are driven by logic or by the desperate need to recover lost ground. The 1% trader is building. The 10% trader is surviving, and sometimes not even that. There is something else worth understanding about losses, something that goes beyond the math. Losses have a gravitational pull. When you lose a significant amount, your entire mental orientation shifts. You stop looking forward, you start looking backward, you stop asking, where is the next good opportunity, and start asking, how do I get back to where I was? These are completely different questions that require completely different mental states. Looking forward for opportunity requires patience, openness, calm assessment of what the market is presenting. Looking backward for recovery requires urgency, aggression, the willingness to take trades that don't fully meet your criteria because you need the win. One of these mental states makes you money over time. The other destroys accounts. When your losses are small, you never enter this gravitational field. A bad week is a bad week. A small dent. Annoying, worth reviewing, but not something that warps your entire psychological relationship with the next trade. When your losses are large, they pull you into their orbit. And the strategies traders adopt when they're in that orbit, the revenge trades, the oversized recovery positions, the desperate swings that look nothing like their actual strategy, that's where accounts go to die. Not in one bad trade, in the emotional spiral that follows one bad trade that was too big. There is a practice in Japanese pottery called wabi-sabi. It's a worldview centered on the acceptance of imperfection. Pottery made in this tradition deliberately incorporates natural irregularities, cracks, asymmetries. The imperfect bowl is not a failed bowl. It is an honest bowl, one that reflects the nature of things as they actually are. Professional traders have a version of this. They call it accepting that losses are part of the process. Not tolerating losses, not grudgingly acknowledging them, genuinely accepting that any strategy, however good, will have losing trades. Any system, however well built, will have losing weeks. Any trader, however skilled, will have losing months. The attempt to eliminate losses entirely, to trade only when certainty is maximum, to size up until wins are large enough to feel satisfying, these are attempts to avoid the nature of trading as it actually is. And those attempts, consistently and predictably, make things worse. Accepting losses as part of the process doesn't mean being passive about them. You review them, you learn from them, you ask whether they were the result of poor process or just normal variance, but you don't treat them as emergencies that require immediate and aggressive response. They are wabi-sabi, they are the cracks in the bowl that make it real. There's a practical framework worth building into how you approach every trade. Before you enter, ask 3 questions. First, if this trade hits my stop, how much do I lose? And is that amount one I can absorb without it changing my mental state for the next trade? If the answer is no, the position is too big. Second, if I take 5 trades like this and they all lose, where is my account? Is it still viable? Am I still in the game? If the answer is no, you're one bad streak from being out, and bad streaks happen to everyone. Third, am I sizing this trade based on my standard risk parameters or based on how I feel about it? If it's the latter, reduce the size until you're back to standard. These 3 questions won't make you a better analyst. They won't improve your entries or your exits or your understanding of technical structure. But they will keep you alive long enough for your analysis and entries and exits to actually matter. And that matters more than almost anything else, because a good trader who stays in the game for 5 years will outperform a great trader who blows up twice in the same period. Longevity compounds. Talent without longevity is just a brief streak followed by a lesson. Consider the difference between two kinds of athletes. The first is a sprinter. Everything they have, everything goes into the next 100 meters. They are fully committed, fully extended, nothing held back. For 10 seconds they are extraordinary. The second is a marathon runner. They know they have 42 kilometers to cover. They start at a pace they can sustain. They manage their energy. They don't respond to every burst from other runners by sprinting to match them. They keep their form, stay in their lane, conserve what they need for the long road ahead. At the 100-meter mark, the sprinter is winning. At the 10-kilometer mark, the sprinter is somewhere on the side of the road. Trading is a marathon. Not a sprint, not a middle-distance race, a marathon. The finish line isn't this week or this month. It's years from now, maybe decades. And the approach that looks most impressive at the 100-meter mark is often the approach that doesn't make it to the 10-kilometer mark. You will watch traders on social media have extraordinary months, screenshot after screenshot of massive returns, accounts that triple in 90 days. It's real, it happens. What you won't see is what happens next. Because the people who triple their accounts in 90 days by taking on massive risk almost never hold those gains, they give them back in a way that is just as fast and far less photogenic. The screenshots stop. The account goes quiet. And then usually a new account appears, usually with a story about how they were hacked or had a software glitch or the market was manipulated. They weren't hacked. They hit the wall that every sprinter hits when they try to run a marathon at sprint pace. There is a trader, well known in certain circles, who manages significant capital and has done so successfully for many years. He was asked once what single piece of advice he would give to traders starting out. He said, survive. Not make money, not find an edge, not study the right markets or master the right indicators. Survive. Because surviving long enough in markets exposes you to the full range of market conditions. It teaches you things that no book can teach and no simulation can replicate. It gives you the emotional experience of actual drawdowns and actual recoveries and actual winning streaks. And it keeps you present for the moments when conditions are exceptional, when opportunities arise that only happen once or twice a decade, and when being in the market with capital is worth more than any individual trading skill. You cannot benefit from a market you are no longer participating in. And you stop participating the moment your account is zero. Every decision you make should be evaluated first through this lens. Does this decision increase or decrease my probability of still being here in 2 years? Some decisions feel exciting and look aggressive, but dramatically reduce that probability. Others feel boring and conservative but protect it. Choose the second kind more often than feels natural, more consistently than feels necessary. Then watch what happens over years. There's something else most traders learn too late, and it is quieter and more personal than position sizing or risk management. It is this: the market will never give you permission. It will never send you a signal that says, now is the time, now you may risk more, now you have earned the right to size up. That feeling of permission will always have to come from within, and it will never come from a winning streak, because winning streaks are not indicators of future performance. They are just winning streaks. The traders who give themselves permission to take bigger risks after a run of wins are making an error that feels like logic but is actually emotion. They feel hot. They feel like they're in sync with the market. They feel like they've figured something out, and so they size up. And then they experience what the market does to traders who size up. The lesson is not to wait for permission. The lesson is to decide your risk parameters in advance from a calm, clear-headed state when you have no positions on and nothing to defend. Decide what you're willing to risk per trade, write it down, and then apply it consistently regardless of how recent trades have gone. This is the only risk management plan that actually works. Because any plan that shifts based on your recent emotional experience is not a plan. It's just a description of your mood dressed up in trading language. We started by talking about a moment. The moment that almost every trader experiences when a number on a screen is smaller than it should be, and you're sitting there trying to understand how you got here. That moment is not the end. For some traders, it becomes the beginning, the real beginning. The moment where something shifts, where the desire to prove something to the market gets replaced by the quieter, more durable commitment to understand it. The traders who arrive at that shift and stay with it, who start asking different questions and building different habits and measuring success in different ways, those are the ones who eventually build something real. Not quickly, not dramatically, not in ways that make for interesting content on a Tuesday afternoon. But steadily, honestly, in a way that compounds. The lesson most traders learn too late is not a complex one. It is simply this: the goal is not to win the biggest trade, the goal is to still be trading when the biggest opportunities arrive. And the way you ensure that is by protecting your account, protecting your psychology, and protecting your capacity to make clear decisions, especially on the hard days. Especially when the market is doing things that feel impossible to predict. That protection starts with how much you risk on any single trade. Everything else follows from there. Take a breath. You don't have to have this all figured out today. Most of the traders who eventually got it right didn't get it right the first time or the second. The market is patient in its teaching, even if it isn't always gentle. What you can do today is simpler than any strategy. Decide what you're willing to lose on a single trade. Make that number small enough that losing it 5 times in a row leaves you calm and capable of the next trade. Write it down, keep it constant. And then just show up consistently, patiently. Like water,